Good day, everyone. Welcome inside once again to the Red Mile Rundown episode number 2. It is training camp / preseason time. Exciting. Alongside me, Johnny Soap here, is Robert Munich. How are you, Robert?
I'm doing good. Just coming off a fantastic weekend, kind of in like the Fernie Sparwood area in the mountains. So
Nice.
feeling refreshed, feeling rejuvenated, and ready to go here.
Well, Robert had a nice relaxing weekend. I watched kids all weekend, so we'll see how that goes.
Not
But
so
it's all
relaxing.
it's not, but it's fun in its own different way. So
Yeah.
much like the fun we saw yesterday in Seattle, all those who watched that preseason game, it was a lot of kids making the road trip out west for the Calgary Flames. We saw a lot of guys that people were itching to see, guys like Perek and Rustavich and Dustin Wolf got the start. Robert, your overall views on that game we saw yesterday and what we can take away from that lopsided win against the Kraken.
I mean, it is the first preseason game of the season, so I don't think you want to take away too much from it. However, it's really pretty much all we have to go off of for a lot of these players. So we are going to dissect it like crazy, as every Calgary Flames fan is going to do. But I came away very impressed with that group of players because they went into Seattle, playing against quite a few NHLers. So like some of the guys that played for the Kraken yesterday, like their goalie Philip Grubauer, Adam Larson, Vince Dunn, Cale Fleury, Jordan Eberle, Matty Beniers, Ty Karche, Oliver Bjorkstrand. Like they had like half of their roster were like NHL players, whereas the Flames they had sent. I think the guy that had the most NHL experience might have been Kevin Rooney, if I'm not mistaken.
I think so.
So I mean, the Flames on paper were totally outmatched, but they took it to Seattle. So good on that group of players that went out there.
Not to toot the horn of the Flames too much here, but how bad did Grubauer look last night for Seattle? If I was the Kraken, I might be a little bit worried about their goaltending situation. But it's full credit to the Flames, in my opinion, of what we saw from those kids. They did exactly what you wanted them to do, and they went out there and they worked and they competed. And the score line aside, for me, that's what you want to see. That's what I want from preseason games when you're trying to evaluate these kids and who should make this team or stay in camp longer. You want to see that competitive nature. We'll get into a few players here in a second of what we saw, but I didn't see anybody take a night off per se for the Flames. I saw everyone digging in, everyone pulling their weight, everyone did a really good job from the net out through everybody, and that went out west there. And that's a very positive sign for me because that carries it right on from what we saw through the young stars in Penticton as well. Those same players that were in Penticton that are in main camp that we saw in that game just carry that momentum forward. I want to start with Hunter Brustevich for me, because for me, from the start to where we saw him now, he's played in 3 games now, has 4 points for the Flames, and he comes as advertised. For me, he's been, my favorite Flame I've seen in any Flames action I've seen so far from these guys, the way he approaches the game. I thought it was interesting that Ryan Huska said he looked a lot like a young Rasmus Anderson. That's a positive little thing for me. That's not it's not a bad comparison to have if you're Brustevich. His defensive game is a lot better than what we saw last year with the Kitchener Rangers. This kid has done everything asked of him by the Flames, and he continues to make leaps and bounds. What have you made of Hunter Brustevich, Robert?
Yeah, I mean, he doesn't look like a 19-year-old / 20-year-old in his first training camp with the Flames. Like, he looks very comfortable on the ice. The speed of the game does not look like it overwhelms him. He's making really good decisions, really good passes. I'm with you. I've been super impressed with what he's been able to do so far. And I'm looking forward to seeing how he kind of progresses throughout camp. I wonder if he's going to be one of those guys that ends up really pushing for a roster spot. Maybe pushing a Tyson Berry out, maybe pushing kind of a guy like Joel Hanley or Solovyov or Kuznetsov kind of out of the way and overtaking them as that next defenseman who could maybe step up and become an NHLer. So, yeah, I'm excited just to see how he progresses. And as the kind of the main piece of that Elias Lindholm trade, I think he's really, really looking good. And another name I'll add to the mix from last night was Matt Coronado. I don't know if I've ever seen Coronado play that well before. I know he had like an incredible preseason last year too. Like this guy's like the Michael Jordan of preseason hockey. He's just absolutely lighting it up. But he was super dynamic last night. Like when you watch Matt Coronado in the past, I don't think I would use the word dynamic when describing him. Maybe his shot is electric. It's pretty elite, but not necessarily his skating or his playmaking or his hands. I never really consider that dynamic. But last night, like he was explosive. Like his skating was excellent. Especially kind of like using his edges, his like east-west kind of skating was really impressive. The puck handling, the passing, it was ridiculous. This looked like a whole new Matt Coronado. And I know the Calgary Flames, they kind of made a pretty big deal about how he's been working with their skating coach in the offseason, Danielle Fujita. I saw them put out like some videos and stuff like that, and people have really been talking about how he's working closely with her, and it looks like it based off, once again, based off of one game. But I thought he was moving better than I've ever seen him. He was making plays. He got off a couple of really good shots. So I was really impressed with him. And that's the kind of performance that guy needs coming into training camp. Because, I mean, he has to earn his way on this team. If you kind of look at the way the lines are set right now, he's not in that top 9. So he has to go out and he has to dominate if he wants to get into that mix. And he did just that in Seattle last night. It was super impressive.
Whatever the message from Daniela to Matt Coronado definitely sunk in, because I don't think I've seen him as active as I saw him last night in any game that I've watched him in. And by that, I don't mean just running around doing whatever, but he was skating very well, both ends of the ice, active stick. He was engaged in everything that he did. Yes, we all know preseason game 1, not always the toughest competition, but it doesn't matter who the competition is. What we saw is a different Matt Coronado, a Matt Coronado taking the next step in his personal development. And that, like you mentioned, Robert, that's very key for him. He has to have that type of preseason that says, no, I'm ready for this role. I'm ready to take a job away from whoever he might be taking away. Maybe he does fourth Anthony Mantha down the roster into a fourth line role. Maybe that's the kind of role that he forces the hands of the coach here. Last night was a very good step for Matt Coronado. That pass he had across the seams, unbelievable eyes, vision. He showed a whole new skill set. We've never seen Matt Coronado pass the puck like he did last night, and it was brilliant. Absolutely, eyes in the back of his head. For me, absolutely one of the biggest leaps I've seen in a guy's progression from year to year from the Flames in a long, long time. Consistency now will be the question that I'll put forward for Matt Coronado. Can you consistently do it? Another big test coming up for him against Edmonton. He should fare well in that game as well, I think, if he continues to play like he's playing. Absolutely love what Matt Coronado has brought to the table so far.
Yeah. Do you have any other performers you wanted to shout out? I mean, there's a few that we could maybe just quickly touch on. You probably don't need to go too in depth, but I'm curious. Do you have like any other kind of quick hitters here?
There's a quick one I'd like to have about Adam Klapka. We saw a nice couple flashes from him last night. I think he had a solid game here, and I think he's a name that we kind of skip over when we talk about that fourth line to who could be the first call-up from the Wranglers. I think Adam Klapka's name is starting to get a little bit missed in that conversation. The way we saw him play last night, I wonder if he's really trying to assert himself to be, hey, no, it shouldn't be Walker Duehr there. It shouldn't be even a Ryan Lomberg there. It should be Adam Klapka there. I wonder what you thought of Adam Klapka last night.
Yeah, I thought he was pretty solid. He scores the 2 goals. I thought he was pretty physical. I noticed. I think he was like really pissing off the Seattle Kraken, because there were a few times where I think like it was Max McCormick and Jared McCann. Like there were guys who were all over Klapka like throughout the whole game. And now I don't know like with McCormick if that's like a AHL like Wrangler Firebird type of battle going on there, but that's what you want to see from Adam Klapka, because he needs to be physical. And he needs to piss off opponents if he wants to play on a fourth line in the NHL. So yeah, I'm with you. He is definitely in the mix for a fourth line role. One thing that just kind of popped in my head here. I'm kind of curious, like if he doesn't end up making the Flames out of camp, do you think there's a chance that he could get claimed off waivers? Because I mean, like you look at the progression throughout his career. He's gotten so much better from his first year in the AHL to his second year. He's got the huge frame. He could skate. He's got some pretty solid hands for a big man. Like, those guys don't grow on trees. Like that's a very rare commodity in hockey. So I'm almost curious if maybe like one of the, bottom teams in the NHL that don't have a ton of depth at forward might take a flyer on that kind of guy. Do you see it the same way, or am I out to lunch on that one?
Yeah, I even got a team for you. I know a lot of players are linked with this team because it's the hottest team in the world to play for, but remember who brought him into the National Hockey League and brought him over from overseas? General Manager Brad Treliving. That's the kind of player that might be missing from that Toronto Maple Leafs roster. Yes, I know their cap situation, everything like that, but a team like that maybe he adds a little grit and toughness to their bottom six, and elevates their bottom six from what they have over there, because that's a top heavy roster, and this could be a guy that can go in there and sneakily do a job for a guy like Brad Treliving, who knows him well, who scouted him well for a long time before they signed him to a contract. So that might be a sneaky thing to watch. I absolutely think that someone out there might take a flyer on Klapka.
That's bringing up Treliving. That's super interesting. I could see something like that happening. A few other just like kind of quick hitters from me from last night in Seattle. I thought Sam Morton was pretty solid. I don't think a lot of people were talking about him. I liked his game. Like, wasn't flashy or anything, but I just thought he was rock solid. I thought Cole Schwint looked pretty good. Artem Grushnikov, and then Braden Pahal was a beast out there physically. I think he finished the night with 8 hits, kind of set the tone for the Flames. Like, hey, we're not going to get pushed around tonight. He kind of set the tone. And then one guy I kind of want to talk about a little bit is Sam Honzek, because there's been I don't know if there's negativity, but people are skeptical of Honzek a little bit. And last night was his best game since being drafted by the Flames. I thought he was really good. We kind of finally saw why he was a first round pick last night, which was great to see.
Couple of things there. One, I think Cole Schwint, this is a very important training camp for him. I think he needs to continue to have a really progressive way. He might not make the team out of camp here, but he could be that 14th forward type thing, called up, take a spin on that fourth line. I like the versatility that he could bring to a lineup. I thought Greshnikov was one of the better defensemen last night. I love how he stood up for teammates last night, what he brings to the table. Pahal was named the hardest working Flame on the radio by that broadcast. I agree with everything you said about him. And there's a lot of skepticism around Honzek, and I get both sides of the conversation. We got to remember this kid hasn't turned 20 yet. He has an opportunity here coming off some pretty big injuries to make an impression in camp. I thought he had a decent young stars in Penticton. I thought he had himself a good night, a good starting point in that preseason game last night, got on the score sheet and was able to be effective in the role given to him. Much like Coronado, can he duplicate that effort now going forward and continue to progress himself? I'm still in the camp of let this guy go to the A and let this guy just play the pants off for this guy. Give him all the minutes in the HL. Let him progress on his own. Don't need to rush this guy. Flames are obviously in a rebuild here. Don't rush this guy. I know a lot of draft picks around him are close to playing or have played in the National Hockey League. But if you're going to measure your success based on other teams' draft picks, it's going to be a sad time for you as a Calgary Flames fan. Just know what the player is at this point and let him go play. But I thought he was all right last night, and I like the progression we're seeing from Honzek overall here.
Yeah, 100%. Just let him grow. Give him 2 or 3 years in the AHL. Like you said, there's literally zero rush to get this guy to the NHL. And I mean, just look at a guy like Martin Pospisil. Like, he went through injuries. It took him until he was 24 years old to become an NHL player. Like, maybe Honzek's going to go down the same path, and if it does, then it does. Like, that's just the way it's going to go. And as long as the Flames are smart with him and he does turn into an NHL player, I think that's all that matters in the grand scheme of things. It doesn't really matter when he gets there. One other guy I'll just bring up quickly. If there was one sort of thing I was a little disappointed in last night, was actually Jacob Pelche. I thought he was very quiet because, similar to Matt Coronado, this camp is massive for Jacob Pelche if he wants to make this team. And I just thought he was a little quiet last night. I know he had like one partial breakaway. I think he ended up missing the net. That was really the only play where I kind of noticed him, like, oh, like there's Pelche. And, he was playing with Kevin Rooney and Dryden Hunt, 2 AHL, NHL veterans. So in theory, you would think that line was probably the number one line, and you kind of expect a little bit more from him. But just seeing a guy like Coronado thrive and Klapka thrive and a couple other forwards, I think it's kind of too bad that Pelche wasn't in that conversation as well.
All the worrying people are doing about Honzek should actually be focused on to Jacob Pelche, in my opinion. He wasn't noticeable for me last night. In fact, I forgot he played until I went back and was looking at the score sheet and looking over notes today before the show today. I forgot Jacob Pelche was in the game last night. I honestly did. He wasn't noticeable, and that to me is extremely disappointing, because what you want to see from Pelche is what Matt Coronado is doing, taking an opportunity and elevating your game. I don't know what's going on with Pelche here. I'm not going to call him a bust of a first round pick, but he's got a big job ahead of him here to give himself a chance. You guys got Adam Klapka and Swinton, we've talked about on the show here, are lapping this guy for a job in the National Hockey League. Just to be blunt about it, we need to see a lot more from Jacob Pelletier. I absolutely agree with you. One guy we don't need to see a lot more of, because he did a really good job last night of it, was Dustin Wolf. And I want to change the conversation over to the goaltending a little bit here, because Dustin Wolf was the first goaltender to get a preseason start, obviously, for the Flames this season. And he got off on the right foot and put himself in the driver's seat at the moment to be the number one goaltender for the Flames with that performance last night. He was steady in goal. He tracked pucks really well. He played very solidly. And he laid down a very high bar for these other two goaltenders in Vladar and Cooley, who are starting in versus Edmonton in the split squads on Monday night. This is the bar to beat, guys. Here it is. And he's raising that bar early in the preseason. Very positive signs from Dustin Wolf here. And I think that gives him a massive head start here in the goalie conversation of who should be the starter for the Flames. What did you make of Dustin Wolf here putting himself on the map?
Man, he looked confident last night. Like he looked like he was in charge of that game. There was no doubts. Like I think we saw last season, there were nights where you could tell Wolf kind of lost his confidence a little bit. He was kind of getting beat high a few times, and it led to a few, below average starts in the NHL last season. I didn't get that impression from him whatsoever last night. He was calm, cool, collected, and he didn't need to make any grade A saves. Like I don't think the Kraken really pestered him with too many grade A's, but he was just rock solid in all the saves he made. Like good rebound control, like there were like no second chances. All those types of things that you want to see from him, we saw last night. So I was super impressed. And you're right. He has set the bar very high for Devin Cooley and Dan Vladar, who I would assume are going to get some action tonight against Edmonton in the split squad games. But I'm curious, kind of like what's your overall sort of impression of the goalie battle heading into training camp? Who do you think has the leg up right now? What do you see sort of playing out here?
Well, I think Dustin Wolf has the leg up now after that performance last night. He didn't look small like everyone claims he's too small to play in this league. He didn't look it last night. He looked fantastic. Yes, we know the circumstance over that game last night, but I think Dustin Wolf put himself in the driver's seat. I did say on the first episode of Red Mile Rundown that I think that Devin Cooley could be the day one starter for this team. I'm going to stick with it still because it's only been one game and he hasn't had a chance to play yet. He'll play, I believe, in the game in Edmonton if I read all the tweets properly. I think it's still very much wide open. I think the bar's been raised by Dustin Wolf, and I think you have two guys who know what it's going to take to match that effort and to match that battle level. And it's not even about getting the win tonight. Both those guys could go out there and get losses against Edmonton, but still have a really good high performance. And that's what you're measuring this on, right? You're measuring it on how they got to the result. Are they steady in their net? Are they calm? Are they playing the puck? Are they fluid in their emotions? Are they, calm in that crease? And Dustin Wolf did a really good job of that in Seattle, and I'm really looking forward to seeing these other two guys try to do the same thing for them. So for me, it's still completely wide open, but the bar has been set by one guy.
Yeah, 100%. And one guy I want to talk about here is Dan Vladar. I don't think enough people are kind of talking about this. And the question that if you're the Calgary Flames and you're the goaltending department, the question I think you need to ask yourself is who is part of the future of the Calgary Flames in the crease?
100%.
And in my opinion, Dan Vladar is not part of the future of the Flames. And I think personally that should have a big impact on how they approach NHL starts this year. Because, like I said, he's not part of the future. He's on an expiring contract. Both Wolf and Cooley are signed next year on one-way deals. So even if Dan Vladar, even if he does have a decent season, like, will he want to even come back to Calgary? Will the Flames even want to sign him next year? So I don't understand the point in having him around this season, considering the future. I think you want to invest in Dustin Wolf and you want to invest in Logan Cooley, who have contracts beyond this year. And like with Dan Vladar, like I think we kind of know what he is. I think he's an NHL backup goalie. And at best, I think his ceiling is kind of a 1B in like a platoon. Maybe he gets 30 to 35 starts. So I guess like my hot take for this week is I think the Flames need to move on from Dan Vladar and either explore the trade market for him, or if there is no trade market, and like I don't really see much of a trade market for the guy because he's coming off 2 bad years in a row. He makes a lot of money
Surgery.
for a backup goalie coming off surgery. So like I really have a hard time seeing them even getting a draft pick for him at this point. So me
It's
personally, I was just gonna say
oh, go ahead.
I'm okay with them either exploring that trade market or putting him on waivers. I would totally
Mhm.
do that because I think it's time to invest in Dustin Wolf and Devin Cooley.
It really behooves Dan Vladar to have a good preseason training camp for a couple different reasons. One, he's trying to win a job in Calgary, but two, bar that, he wants to make sure that he has the ability to show other teams, hey, I'm worth trading for, and create himself a market outside of Calgary. He knows the situation that he is the only goaltender not signed beyond this year on a one-way deal. He knows that. And so for him, you want to have a good preseason. You want to have a good training camp. So I think that benefits the Flames because that's going to keep the heat on the other two guys. But I'm with you, Robert. This is an opportunity for the Flames to really pick and choose. We want to focus our energy on these guys. This is our future. Here's how we think it's going to play out, and move on from Dan Flynn. All due respect to Dan, he's a great guy. He's a fine goaltender in a backup role. He's coming off a tough surgery and hip surgery. When you mention hips and goalies in the same sentence, I'm always going to take a pause to that because you never know how that's going to react. And so I'm with you on this one. Dustin Wolf needs to play, and based on what Craig Conroy has said and Ryan Huska has said through multiple interviews that I've been able to watch and read about, they want to get this guy games. They want to get this guy playing, and they want to get him playing at the NHL level. And so it comes down to, what do you want with Dustin Wolf? Do you want Cooley or do you want Vladar? And the way they talk about Cooley, I think he has an inside track here because they talk about this guy like he is going to help save this franchise, like he is going to come out of left field and get Vezina votes. Like, they're praising this guy so much that they have a future plan for Devin Cooley in Calgary. And so you want your two San Jose based goaltenders to have the tandem and run with it. And unfortunately for Dan Vladar, that puts him on the outside looking in. And I think I'm a little higher on his trade value than you might be, based on the fact that people might look at him, hey, this is a guy who's been in the National Hockey League for a few years behind some good goaltending in Jacob Markstrom, a good mentor in Jacob Markstrom. He's coming off an injury, sure, but this is an opportunity for a fresh start for Dan Vladar, and they could think that there's always that general manager out there thinks who can save a guy just by bringing him into their situation. It's a very interesting conversation to have. Dan Vladar, though, needs to have himself a good preseason to have any of that come to fruition for him, though.
Yeah, and I just go back to those ceilings. Like I said, I think 1B is the ceiling for Vladar. And the exciting thing about Logan Cooley is that Devin Cooley is we don't know what his ceiling is. Like it literally could be like 60 start NHL goalie for all we know. And I think the Flames need to find that out sooner than later. And like another thing too is I always see a lot of people say, like, well, the Flames gave up a 3rd round pick to get Dan Vladar. So, they wanted, from an asset management perspective, they want to get something back for him. But like the way I see it is, like, I see this more of like just a sunk cost. Like, they paid the 3rd round pick. It happened. It's over. There's really no point in holding on to Vladar just so you can maybe get a 4th round pick or maybe get a 5th round pick. And then kind of essentially you're creating a goalie controversy and kind of holding these goalies hostage over like a 5th round pick or 4th round pick. And I just don't think that makes sense right now. So, and like you said, it kind of sucks always like talking about players like they're like these commodities and these assets, because like you said, Vladar comes across as like such a good guy and like a good guy in that room, good guy in the community. So it's kind of crappy talking like this, but unfortunately the NHL is a bit of a ruthless business, and I think the Flames might need to take emotion aside and take kind of that friendly sort of relationship they have with Vladar and just really invest in Wolf and Cooley.
Yeah, it's unfortunately that's the business side of things, right? You have to think when you're dealing with a business, you have to think of them as assets. But when you deal with them as human, you know that they're another human. And as far as trading or trying to recoup assets for Dustin or for Dan Vladar, it's all about, sometimes you make a gamble and it doesn't pay off. We see it across the league all the time where a draft pick's moved for a guy and it doesn't work out at the end of the day. And it's just how it is. It's just what business is. You take shots every now and then. They don't always work out for yourself. Another thing we're not mentioning with this goalie goalie conversation, if I can spit my words out here, is they just signed a guy. They brought him over who had himself a really good rookie camp. I can't pronounce his name very well, so I'm not gonna try to butcher it for you guys.
Valtteri
He's gonna get
Ignatieff.
Ignatieff. Is that how we're saying it?
Yeah.
Ignatieff. He's going to get a lot of time in the AHL to play, and he's going to get a ton of starts playing with Connor Murphy down there. And this is a guy who's shown he can play on the smaller ice. There's always that transition period for a lot of goaltenders. He didn't have a transition period. He showed up and he played extremely well, and Pentic did, and get comfortable in the AHL. This is a guy who could potentially push even as early as next year. Hey, I'm ready to be in part of the conversation here. So there's guys tapping on the door behind Dan Vladar, behind Cooley here, saying, hey, don't forget about this, because there's also a bunch of Russian guys coming as well. The job's not secure. If you want the job, you got to play well. And at the end of the day, a numbers game is going to happen for the Flames. There's going to be one guy who's going to be on the outside looking in. And right now, if you're going to put odds on it, I think my odds would be that Dan Vladar is the odd man looking into this conversation. I don't know how you see about that.
Yeah, so I 100% agree. And, I talked about the potential of putting him on waivers. I don't think that's the worst idea, because, I believe his contract, I don't have it up in front of me, but I think he makes a little over $2 million a year. And with a bunch of teams right up against the salary cap, I have a hard time picturing him getting picked up. Maybe a team like a San Jose would take a flyer on him, but they already have Askarov. They're kind of set for their goaltending in the future. But
they got 4 guys.
So even a team like San Jose may not be able to get him. And I think having Vladar in the AHL might not be the worst thing, because he could be maybe a bit of a mentor for Ignatieff. Because like you said, this is his first year in North America. Having a guy who's played in the NHL for 3 years could be super helpful for his development. So I just personally, I don't really think the goaltending situation's all that complicated. I think it's Wolf and Cooley all day long. And look to move on from Dan Vladar.
Give me interesting how it plays out. I looked it up while you were talking there. Dan Vladar is going to start in the game in Calgary, and Cooley is going to start in the game in Edmonton on Monday night if you're watching the split squad game. So it's interesting how that will play out for both guys.
One last thing I'll just throw out there is if my memory serves me right, Dan Vladar is always outstanding in the preseason. I believe like I said, my memory serves me right, the last 2 years he has been phenomenal in the preseason. So I would almost say, if he does that again this year, maybe Flames fans kind of take that with a grain of salt, because he's done it pretty much every year he's been in Calgary, and he's had an up and down sort of track record so far. So I wouldn't put too much stock into this preseason for him. But I think that's enough goaltending chat for now.
Yeah, agreed.
Would you like to move on to some predictions?
Let's do it. Let's make our predictions. Let's make ourselves look like fools here. Where do you want to start with? Where do you want to start with predictions?
So just for the audience out there, so what we're going to do is we're just going to make some predictions. We're going to leading goal scorer, leading assist score, points leader, and then we're going to dive into a couple surprise players. So we'll kick things off with the goal scoring. I'll throw it to you, John. Who do you have leading the Calgary Flames in goals this season?
I have a guy who's going to get back to the 30-goal mark. I think he might even eclipse 35 goals if he can stay healthy. I think this guy will get a lot more power play time for the Flames this year. Give me Igor Sharangovich to lead this team in goals all day. I wonder if there's an outside chance that he can get himself real close to that number 40 mark this year.
Yeah, I actually think that's a pretty good take. In doing some research for an article a couple months ago, so Yegor Sharangovich, he got off to that really rough start last season. I believe it was his first 15, 20 games. He had a really hard time finding a spot in the lineup for himself. And once he kind of found
Sharangovich,
fourth line center Sharangovich, which just doesn't make sense, but that's what happened. So from, I believe it was somewhere around the middle of November, he really started to get comfortable and he started producing. So from the middle of November to the end of the season, he scored at a 36-goal pace with the Flames.
Unreal.
So for you to predict kind of that 35, maybe even push 40 goals for Sharangovich, I don't think is that crazy, because he's going to come in the season comfortable in Calgary, comfortable with his teammates, his line mates. He just signed a new deal. I think he's going to come in and be really good. And like you said, he's going to be on that first power play too. So where he can unleash that bomb of a shot he has. So I like that one from you. I'll go a little different. So my leading goal scorer this year, I think, is going to be Andrei Kuzmenko. And I guess we could say maybe this could be from like a goals per game perspective, because I think it's inevitable that Kuzmenko is going to get traded at some
Me
point
too.
this season. But I truly believe that this guy is in for a monster season, and everyone is sleeping on him. Like, I don't hear anybody in the Calgary market talking about Andrei Kuzmenko this year, outside of the fact that he's probably going to get moved. So like he scored more goals and assists in his rookie year in Vancouver when he scored 39 goals. He scored more goals and assists in Calgary. I think he had 14 goals and 11 assists. So he's got that goal scoring touch. He's got the lethal shot. Like we saw him last season with the Flames beat goalies from distance multiple times. And then he's going to be playing with Nazem Kadri, who's one of the best playmakers on the team. He's going to be on the first line, first power play unit, with essentially the power play unit running through him. So I see Kuzmenko having just a monster year, pushing kind of like that 40, 45 goal range with the Flames.
With the trade deadline, pushing late February, early March, depending on when they put the date, that's a ton of games between now and then, and it's hard to see him getting traded before that point. That's an opportunity here to play 55 plus games with the Flames before you're moved here. And even if you're scoring at half a goal per game type of pace, you're still looking at 25 goals. Like, that's an incredible pace to be at. And I think he's very much capable of that. You saw him at the end of last season on that power play. You saw him with Nazem Kadri pick up his game. And I like that no one's talking about him, because this guy can just then go out there and play. There's no noise around this guy, which was the problem in his second year in Vancouver. There was a lot of noise around this guy, and he's clashing with Tocchet. Quiet game for Kuzmenko means success for Kuzmenko, in my opinion. I like that one for me.
Yep, 100%. All right, now let's go to assists. Who do you think is going to be leading this team in assists this year, John?
But both of us just put 2 goal scorers beside this guy on the top line. So I think Nazem Kadri feeding this, put that puck left or right, Nazem, because you're just going to get points after points after points, and probably power play 1 minutes as well for this guy. I think Nazem Kadri heads and tails leads this team with assists, and he looks good doing it as well on that top line with both those scores we just talked about.
Yep, I'm right there with you. I got Nazem Kadri as well, leading the team in assists. He had 46 assists last season, and that was with a really, really bad start to the year. I believe in his first 11 games, he had 1 assist and was really, really struggling. I don't see that happening again this year. I think he's going to get off to a great start, and pretty much from beginning to end. And I see him breaking that 50 assist mark for the second time in his career. He did it in Colorado when he won the Stanley Cup with them. I think he's going to do it again, playing on that first line with Kuzmenko. I think those two will be one of the most dynamic duos in the entire league. At the end of the season, when you're looking at players' combined points together, I really think you're going to look at Kadri and Kuzmenko as being like a top 10 duo in the NHL. I'm curious. So we both had Kadri. Were there guys that you considered for this outside of Kadri, or did you think that it's a slam dunk for him?
I think it's a slam dunk for him, but I have 2 defensemen. Both these guys could potentially be your power play 1 quarterback in Weegar and Anderson. Both these guys know how to play both ends of the ice. Both these guys had good offensive years last year. I can see them duplicating that same effort this year. I wonder how close Weegar and an Anderson will be to Kadri at the end of the day in the assist column. So I did consider them before I ultimately landed on Kadri, because I really think it is a slam dunk for him.
What about Huberdeau?
No.
No.
I love Huberdeau. Anyone who's seen me tweet over Huberdeau, even back when he was in Florida or the St. John Sea Dogs, I've been tweeting about this guy for years and years. A big fan of this guy and when he plays the game. For whatever reason, it has not translated in 2 seasons in Calgary, and nothing has shown me that this guy is going to be a 40 plus assist guy in the National Hockey League anymore. I just don't see it anymore, and I'm happily going to be wrong on this. And for me, for Jonathan Huberdeau, it might just be at the point where we are stuck with a 50-point Huberdeau. You're looking at a 2020 season from the guy, or a 15-30 season from the guy. I don't see anything more from him. Hopefully I'm wrong, because I'd love to see the guy succeed, but I just don't see it from him anymore. And until you get that back underneath you yet, even close to it, I can't pick you. I just can't do it.
Yeah. No, really, over the last 2 years, he hasn't really given Flames fans a reason to think that he can get back to what he was before. It's just It's just the way it is, unfortunately. But I mean, to the guy's credit, I mean, he did finish second on the team last year in assists with 40.
Mhm.
And he did finish strong, I believe, in from January 1st till the end of the season. He was playing at about a 65-point pace. A lot of those being assists. So, it's not totally out of the question that he's going to be in that conversation, but I think he's got to prove it first. I don't think we can just give him that sort of a award at the beginning of the season. He's got the most assists, because I don't really think he deserves it yet, based off of what we've seen so far during his time in Calgary. But maybe when we get to surprise players, we can dive into him a little bit more. But I'm with you. I think it's going to be Kadri.
Just one more thing on that too. He from the outside right now, it looks like he's going to have a line mate who's also trying to reprove himself in Anthony Mantha. So can Anthony Mantha score goals still? Can Anthony Mantha get to the tough areas and finish these Huberdeau passes? So you got two guys who really haven't shown it the last couple of years, trying to show it. Them together, I don't know if that's a recipe for success or failure. The Flames are definitely going to give it a try, because if it works, they're going to look like geniuses, and it's going to look really good for the Flames. But I don't know. Until I see it, I just can't pick it. It's just how I feel right now.
And a big thing too is he going to be on the first power play unit? And some people might be thinking like you're not going to have Jonathan Huberdeau on your first power play. But if you look at like the configuration, the players on the roster, I'm with you. I actually, to start the season, I would not have him on that first power play unit. I would actually have Anthony Mantha there instead, because of his shot. Like I think I mentioned this on the first episode, but folks out there, if you haven't seen much of Anthony Mantha, just go on YouTube and watch this guy hammer pucks. It's crazy how good his shot is. And there's a reason why the Calgary Flames coaches want him shooting 300 times this year, because it is lethal. So if you could put him 100%. And Sharon Govich with their shots, and then Kuzmenko and Kadri down low, it can make a pretty dangerous power play unit. And I don't see room for Jonathan Huberdeau there just yet. So, we can dive into that.
I can make the case that I wouldn't even put him on power play 2 if you really want to go down that
road.
Whoa! You got to show me something. But think about it. If you think about what Coleman brought to the power play last year, Backlund's brought to the power play for years. You look at Zari, you look at Pospisil, you look at Weegar, you look at Anders. You can name off guys that you would say, I actually prefer how he plays in that situation than Jonathan Huberdeau does. So you could make the case. I don't think he's not going to play power play minutes. Don't get me wrong there. But you can make the case that your power play 2 unit could be Zari with Coronado, Backlund, Coleman, and Anderson.
You could make the case.
You
could make the case. I don't see it the same way. I think Huberdeau will play on the power play. I mean, I'm not saying that you don't think he will, but I think he should be on that second unit just because of his playmaking ability, and that second unit doesn't necessarily have that. I mean, Zary can move the puck a little bit, but I think Huberdeau would be a good fit there.
If Coronado's going to pass like he did in Seattle, there you go.
That's a good point. I don't think we've seen Huberdeau throw backhand sauce across the ice to someone for a one-timer.
Not on his team, anyways.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
Sorry, Huberdeau. Right. I do love the guy. I do. I really want success for the guy, but he's making
you hate
really
Jonathan
hard.
Huberdeau. You hate him.
It's really hard.
Hot take. John hates Jonathan Huberdeau.
You should have seen me last year or the year before trying to defend the guy on Twitter. I got absolutely decimated by people. I tried, John, for 2 years, buddy. You got to give me something this year. You got to.
Yeah, no one can accuse you of hating Jonathan Huberdeau, seriously, because, you have defended the guy like crazy. So, okay, we'll move on to points. Do you have Jonathan Huberdeau leading the team in points this year?
No. Sorry, John. Sorry, I feel shame. No, I got Nazem Kadri here as well. He's going to as many assists as he's going to give to Kuzmenko and Sharon Govich and power play things. This guy's also scoring 30 goals. Like he scored 29 last year, and they tried to quadrupling shifting this guy to get him that 30th goal in that final game last year. I think he's going to be right near that 25 to 30 goals again. He's going to be right near and over a point per game, I think, this year. I think he leads this team in scoring. On a team who might struggle to put the puck in the net, I don't think Kadri's going to struggle getting his points.
Yep, that is a very good call. I'm going back to my boy, Andrei Kuzmenko. I'm on the Andrei Kuzmenko hype train right now. And I'm putting a lot of stock in this guy, so he better not make me look like an idiot here. But I guess the reasoning for it...
He's traded tomorrow.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, he's traded before opening night. We got to scrap the entire episode here. But I kind of touched on it before with the goal scoring and all the reasons why I think he could he could score a ton of goals. It's the same thing when it comes to just overall points. And John, you made a really good point saying that he's playing on a team with like really no pressure. And when he was in his rookie season, when he put up 70 plus points with the Canucks, he was kind of in the same situation. That was not a good Canucks team. There was little to no pressure on them. They got off to a terrible start. So I see something kind of similar happening with the Calgary Flames this year. And there might come a time where Ryan Huska and the staff, the Flames might be out of it, and they just say, like, just play offense, just go out there, be creative, rack up some points. I could totally see something like that happening. So, outside of Kadri and Kuzmenko, is there anybody else that you think could be up there in points, or are those kind of the two guys for you too?
I don't see anybody else in that big leading of the team scoring wise. Just for me, it's going to be Nazem Kadri. You're going to have a lot of guys have good seasons, probably right in that 50 to 60 point range. But I think Kadri is the guy to beat here when it comes to flame scoring.
Yeah, I totally agree with you there. All right, let's do some surprise players. Why don't we start with you? Who do you think is going to be someone that we look back on at the end of the season and say that guy really surprised?
I'm going to dive back into the goaltending conversation. I know we spent a lot of time talking about goaltending, but I am buying the Kool-Aid that the Flames are pouring here of Devin Cooley. I think Devin Cooley is a guy who can come in here, who can surprise a lot of people, and he could take the reins here and run with it for a little bit and be a really good 1A or 1B in this partnership. And I think he's going to surprise a lot of fans who are kind of saying, okay, Devin Cooley's the third guy. He's going to start the year in the A, and then maybe we'll see him later in the year. No, I think this guy's going to start the year in Calgary, and I think he's going to surprise a lot of people.
Love that. Drinking the Cooley Kool-Aid. I'll throw out Kevin Ball as my surprise player. I've written about him at Flames Nation before. So sorry if I'm sounding redundant here, but I really think that there's going to be a good fit in the top four with a guy like Rasmus Anderson. I think he's at that kind of stage in his career at that 24, 25 years old where you take that next step as a defenseman. He's coming off a full summer of training, which he did not do last year. I believe he only had about 2 weeks to essentially get ready for last year's training camp because he was rehabbing an injury. So he's going to come into camp. I know he's hurt right now. He's dealing with a minor issue, but hopefully he can start the season at 100%, coming off a full season of training. I really think that Kevin Ball has the potential to be a pretty solid, like kind of number 4 shutdown defenseman. Nothing flashy, but block lots of shots, penalty kill, hit, fight, clear the front of the net, all that kind of stuff that you're looking for from like a big defensive defenseman from that. So yeah, I'm expecting pretty big things from Kevin Ball this season.
We were talking pre-show a little bit about Kevin Ball, and I mentioned that I don't know if people realize what we actually got in this guy in this trade with New Jersey, to almost gifted us this defenseman in that trade. This guy came off an injury off season the year before last year, managed to play 82 games for a good New Jersey defensive core. I know they had some injuries back there, but this guy was steady. 82 games, looked good doing it. His numbers were just fine for what the role that he brings, and I think he's going to be a great add to this Flames blue line. He's not going to be Chris Tanev diving face first in front of pucks, but this guy's going to be tough in front of the net. He's going to use his size to his advantage, and he will block some shots for you, just not the Chris Tanev way. Really like this pick from you, Robert. I really think he's in for a good season.
Yeah, and actually, I think last year having all those injuries in New Jersey was really big for his development because he was essentially forced to play top 4 minutes. And I think that was a really, really good learning experience for him. I think he can take that into the offseason when he did all of his training, come into Calgary Flames camp fresh, understanding what it takes to be a top 4 defenseman in the NHL. And, hopefully he can apply it. I think he will. So I'm pretty high on Kevin Ball. Were there any other guys you're considering for surprise player?
No, like we talked about last week, there's not really any guy that jumps out of me from the AHL team that's going to come in here and take a job or anything like that. And for me, it's a lot of guys just trying to get duplications of last year or a little bit better than last year on this roster. I really think that the two guys that we named were the two names that I was batting around for guys who I think are going to surprise Flame fans this year. I think we're going to see a lot of status quo things. You're going to see Backlund play his game. You're going to see Coleman be his right-hand man. You're going to see that type of stuff we've always seen from these guys on the Flames, just steady guys on the Flames. And I think that's the kind of year we're in for as the Flames transition their team here a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, a couple guys that I was kind of considering. One was Huberdeau, because I mean, like we had mentioned in that previous conversation, like he hasn't really shown Flames fans that he can be that kind of point per game player. But I really do believe that he could bounce back a little bit and push that kind of 65 point range. I know based off his career totals, I mean, that's setting the bar pretty low for him. But I'd really just, I have this kind of gut feeling that he could bounce back, because I think last year he had 52 points. If he could, increase that by 13, I think that would be a really nice bounce back year for him. And then the other guy I was thinking about was Daniil Miramanov, because during his time with the Flames last year, the analytics were very good for him. Him and Mackenzie Weegar were a good possession pairing. They were on the ice, I believe, is 12 goals for, 8 goals against, a 5-on-5. All their analytics, like Corsi for and high danger chances, expected goals, were all above 50%, even above 55. So the analytics showed me last year that there might be something there with Miramanov. The eye test was a little bit of a different story for me, and that's why I didn't go with him, because I was just a little bit worried about the skating and just the quickness and quick playmaking. But the analytics were very favorable for Daniil Miramanov last year, so it's going to be pretty interesting to see if he can step up and maybe even be a top 4 defenseman alongside Weegar.
He's definitely in that prove it category for me. I wonder how much of that last year was Weegar. Not to give Weegar too much credit and not enough to Miramanov, but I'd like to see it on a longer term. So interesting to see how he performs this year. I wonder if he can push his way into that power play conversation, because that's kind of his skill set. I wonder if he can push the pace a little bit from his position. Obviously, his skating is a little bit of something needs to get worked on a bit, but I think he's in for a good season here, playing alongside of Mackenzie Weegar, if that's how it ends up being. Wonder what his ceiling is, because you really need one guy that you don't know a ton about. What's his ceiling? What can he get to from the Flames, and how consistent can he be? How much of that good numbers was Weegar versus Miramanov on that pairing? Or is it just one of those pairings that fit together like a glove and they just work for whatever reason? You never know. Interesting to see how that plays out this year. I like that one.
So I know this was in the show notes and we didn't prepare for this, but I'll put you on the spot. I'm curious, do you think there are any guys that are maybe going to take a step back this year? Because we're talking about surprise players from a positive perspective. Do you think there are any guys that might have, taken, maybe a small step back, or maybe even a couple?
Oh man, don't hate me, Flame fans. I'm not a hot takey guy, but Martin Pospisil's moving to center. Can he duplicate the effectiveness from last year to this year? That's a situation where you're moving to a new position. There could be a step back in that. He still might have a really good season, but is he going to be as an effective player doing that for the Calgary Flames? I love the player. Don't get me wrong here. This isn't another railing like I did on Huberdeau, but just you always have to make a pause when you're moving a guy a position and responsibilities like that. And can you duplicate that in your second full season in the National Hockey League? Now players are prepared for you going into games. Now guys are, hey, this is that rat. I got to go up against that guy again today. I'm prepared for it. I'm engaged for it. Can he duplicate it? Can he be as effective as last year? What about you, Robert? Anyone you think can take a step back here?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting you say Pospisil, because I was out for a walk today, a contemplative walk, and I was just thinking, I'm like, I think one thing like Flames fans and media should do is kind of temper expectations for Pospisil and Connor Zary, because I mean, like, they were both so good last year, and there's always like that kind of sophomore slump sort of thing that you always hear about, and that could potentially happen with both these guys. So like, if I'm a Flames fan, like I'm not thinking to myself like Zary's going to get 60 points and Pospisil is going to get 50, and these guys are slam dunk top 6 guys for next season. For 2024, 2025. If they can kind of replicate what they did last year, I think you'd really, really like that from a Flames perspective. If you're Huska and the Craig Conroy. In terms of step backs, I actually, in terms of production, not like actual on ice contribution, I don't think Mackenzie Weegar is going to get 20 goals again. I could see him being in that kind of 13 to 15 sort of range. It just felt like a lot of things went right for him last year. Because I mean, like he
played a
doesn't have
ton too.
he played a ton. He doesn't really have like the best shot. Like I know a lot of people joke that he's got a muffin. I don't think he's a muffin, but there were a lot of floaters that kind of found their way to the back of the net last year. I think he had a couple empty nets. He had a hat trick. So like a lot went right for him last year in terms of the goal scoring. And then another guy too is Blake Coleman. Once again, on ice impact, I think he's going to be very effective, like defensively from a leadership perspective, penalty kill, controlling play at 5-on-5. I still think he's going to have a really good year. I don't think he's going to be in that 30 goal range. Last season, he scored 7 empty net goals, which was tied for first in the NHL. So he scored 7 empty netters. Like once again, it just kind of felt like everything went right for him last year. I totally see him being in that 20 to kind of 24 range, but I think pushing 30, I don't know. That might be a little asking a little too much from Blake Coleman, who really hasn't really kind of pushed 30 in his career. I believe from a goals per game perspective, like goals over 82 games, I think his career high was in New Jersey one year at about 24, and last year he had 30. So I would say those two guys might take a step back in the production, but not necessarily like I said, the on ice contribution.
I like that. I think Blake Coleman isn't a 30 goal scorer. I think he's more closer to that 15 to 20. I think he had one of those really good years where a lot of things went right from, like you mentioned there. But you're not paying Blake Coleman to be this 30 goal guy. You're paying Blake Coleman to be this two-way forward, this guy on the penalty kill, this leader in the dressing room, this guy who's going to be there, Mr. Right in the right spot at the right time type of player. Those are the kind of guys that you can win with if you have them in the right situations. So I'm with you on that one. I think he can take a step back production-wise. The Mackenzie Weegar one's interesting. 20 goals is a tall task to do, but I think he's still going to be really effective in his role. I just wonder how much he's going to be pulled back a little bit on his minutes so these other guys can get those minutes in as well, and that might just affect what he can get production wise. But I'm with you on there. Those are two guys that did some really good things last year. A lot of things went right for them. They played a ton of minutes, both those guys, especially after all those trades were made by the Flames, and they're going to be counted on again to be big leadership for the Flames this year.
Yeah, I was just going to add, just like if the Flames are in a playoff mix, probably halfway through the season, I mean, a guy like Weegar might end up getting a ton of ice time here. I mean, who knows? I mean, I'm personally a little higher on the Flames than a lot of people are. I wrote about that at Flames Nation, and yes, I heard all your comments and how stupid I am. I get it. But I really believe they're going to be a little bit better, and who knows? Maybe Weegar ends up playing, more minutes and first power play and scores 25 and, shoves it in my face. But yeah, it's going to be interesting to watch for sure.
I read that article, and then I went back, and about 3 hours later, straight to the comment section, straight to the comments. And I had to. I'm just like, how big of a beating is Robert taking in the comment section here? I liked that article. It was a very compelling article. Go find that article on flamesnation.com or .ca and read it, because he actually makes a good case for the Flames. We're coming up on an hour here, Robert. Do you have anything else you want to add to the show? Anything else you want to ask me for this episode of the show?
No, dude, I think we're good. I think we touched on everything, and that was fun.
Beautiful.
Round 2 in the books. That was great.
2 episodes down. Good news for you people who like your Apple podcast and your Spotify podcast. Both are now up and running for your audio. Episode 1 is also available on both of those platforms. So go check out Apple, go check out Spotify, like, subscribe, whatever you got to do there to make sure that our podcast is downloaded to your phone. Don't forget to subscribe to YouTube as well. Red Mile Rundown, it's on there as well. And thank you so much for making us part of your podcast rotation. Robert, where can they find your work and find you on social media?
Yeah, you can find me on X at Ring of Fire CGY. And then you can find all my written work at flamesnation.ca as well. So check out both of those.
Do it. And I'm Vintage Johnny 84 on all your social media platforms. Go ahead, interact with us. Enjoy the games this week. We'll be back next week. We'll react to all of what we saw, and we'll see if anyone's made us look stupid with our predictions so far in the comment sections. Let us know what you think and who your breakout players are, your favorite players going into the season. We'll see you guys next week on the show. This is the Red Mile Rundown.